since 1961. And we just want them to win a damn Super Bowl before we die. Welcome to Before We Die with Jesse and Thor on Purple Daily and Score North.
What's going on, everybody? This is Before We Die on Purple Daily and Score North. I'm Jesse Pierce. He's Thor Nystrom. Joining us, we got the Dex in the house. What's going on, Dex? Thanks for filling in for Ross, who is up watching CFL Winnipeg Blue Bombers. That's his thing. I'm excited for him to recap all that on Monday. You guys see it, Dex? Are you a CFL guy?
I like to make CFL predictions on Write That Down for Purple Daily during the off season, much to Judd Zolgad's and some of the listeners' chagrin. But my take on that is I'm not watching a ton of CFL. I will turn it on every once in a while. But to bring you like behind the scenes of Write That Down, like Judd loves to make a prediction in August of 2022 about like May of 2024. So I don't like to get burned of a prediction that I like made a year and a half in advance. So I'm trying to like make as many predictions in the short term, whether they don't work out for me or not. As long as they're coming off the board, I'm cool with that. So that's why I do CFL. But I'm more surprised Ross Brendel was not like bragging about Dateline or any other news talk that he loves to watch and stuff. So it's very much up Ross's alley to watch all that stuff.
You know, that's all right. That'll happen. It's it's fun. It's great having you on here. We've got Vikings talk. As always, we are here to bring you the Vikings news. It's preseason weekend, right? We'll call it the weekend. It's Thursday. I'm not drinking a White Claw for those who might see my energy drink. Advertisements don't come free, so I won't tell you what it is. But let's dive into it. Are we excited about preseason football returning? Are we excited to see the purple on Sunday at 3:25 in Las Vegas?
We're so excited. Yeah. We get to see him on the field.
You sounded excited, Thor.
I am super excited. The one thing I'm sort of, I'm sure we'll get into this more later on, but I'm curious to see how much of the new schemes we're going to see. Because typically Sean McVay teams were pretty vanilla in the preseason. So I'm curious to see what sort of, gadget plays, different formations, or if it's going to be more on the vanilla side. But I can't wait to see the new schemes.
I would agree. And what are we going to look at? I mean, obviously offense is going to be the big thing. How are they moving? What does this new offense look like? And that's going to be what all are we judging from that offense come Sunday? Because again, it's the first preseason game. And everybody's excited to see what Kevin O'Connell is going to bring. But what in particular, what spots are you really going to be looking at, Thor?
Well, football is like an intrinsically connected sport. One guy's performance is tied to the next guy, et cetera. But I think in preseason, what you're watching for, it's to try to uncouple that. And you're watching the individual players to see if they, if they're moving up or if they're in a better role, stuff like that. But you're looking for the individual performances. I don't know how much we're going to see the starters. Going back to McVay with the Rams, McVay has very rarely played his starters in the preseason, like not at all. And he doesn't even play his top backups very much. So I think, Vikings fans might want to prepare to see it, more of the second, third, fourth stringers, but that's fine too, right? Like we want to see those guys and see how the rookies are doing and some of those guys that they picked up. So we've heard this, there's a lot of competition going on in this camp right now. So it'll be interesting to see who's differentiating themselves once the lights are on.
Right. The Minnesota Vikings releasing their depth chart earlier this week. Jesse Davis wins that right guard position over at Ingram, who we had talked about on Monday is having a very great camp. But it looks like O'Connell's going with experience over Ingram. But I don't think Jesse Davis can be like, yep, this is my spot, because Ingram's chomping at the bit.
1,000%. Yeah. And it's your first depth chart, right? So it's just sort of like handicapping it going forward. But that's one of those jobs that is still not completely decided, like you're saying. And, Ingram is still very much in that. He's been, this isn't just Ingram and some other guys too, but he's had his good moments in camp and he's had his bad moments in camp. I think probably Jesse Davis is giving them more consistency right now. But when you think about like the season at large, and once you get into November, December, who's going to be your best option there? You'd love to see Ingram start to turn it on here the last, 2-3 weeks leading up to the season, potentially steal that job, because that would allow Jesse Davis to be that swing backup we've been talking about, where he can back up 4 different positions. But, if he gives them the better shot early in the season, he's certainly going to be playing with the Packers, opening up, Vikings opening up against the Packers.
Right. Sticking with the interior O lineman, Garrett Bradbury. We got to mention it one more time. I want to get your take, Thor, on Josh Sokol. What are your thoughts on him? Do you think he has any chance on kind of busting through? Because as we've seen and as we know, Garrett Bradbury isn't a guy that Vikings fans or even maybe staff is too high up on.
Yeah, I don't know about Sokol, but the fact that they're giving other guys shots, I think is the important thing there. Arif had mentioned in his most recent dispatch for The Athletic that the other two guys that are being given significant looks with as far as the reps of the first and second team at center, it's Reed and then Schlattman. So I think that's the three-headed race there. Arif mentioned that it right now it would be Reed that that would be the other main competition for Bradbury. Reed had some botch snaps recently, but Schlattman has too. So like what they're getting from Bradbury now, interestingly, it's sort of like the new staff is getting consistency from him. You're not seeing the fumbled snaps and stuff like that. But Kevin O'Connell did come out and say, we really like what we're seeing from Bradbury as a run blocker, which makes sense because they're a heavy zone blocking team. And like we talked about in the last episode, Bradbury's best thing it's the movement. It's being able to hit the outside shoulder of a guy in zone. It's being able to go out to the second level, block a linebacker. So that's not surprising. He is a very good fit for O'Connell's system as a run blocker. But O'Connell also mentioned that the pass pro is an issue right now, and it's been an issue the past couple of years, and it's with power. And sometimes he can get crossed up by moves too, better than or more often than you would think based on his movement. But the biggest thing is the power thing, and you see him sort of sitting back on it, waiting for it. Like when it's a pass play, back on his heels because he's getting ready to have to anchor. You're sort of like loading up a little bit more because you know that you struggle with it. And that might be why he gets his feet tied up sometimes with the moves. But they're working on his pass protection. And if he can at least be passable there, no pun intended, he's probably going to win that starting job.
And they haven't named a true QB2. Again, it's early. It's the first preseason game. Is that surprising at all? Because for me, I thought Kellen Mond probably had solidified the deal, but he's still duking it out with Sean Mannion.
Yeah, it's not a surprise. No, I think if the Vikings had their druthers, Kellen Mond would be the backup. But the problem is he just hasn't developed enough.
Right.
We've heard. He was involved with some of those botched snaps. I don't know if it was on the center, if it's on him. He's also been making some poor decisions in camp. You've seen interceptions, stuff like that. You've also seen a couple, he's had a couple of good plays. There was the one circulating on Twitter over the past couple of days, is sort of rolling out to the left. And then he hit, I think it was Osborn deep. He had a strike to him. I forget the receiver on the other end. But he's had a couple of flash plays, but they're interspersed with these spells of inconsistency. And we'll see, what ends up happening there. The coaching staff's obviously working with him. They know what they got in Sean Mannion. Mannion already knows that system, and, consistent, he at least he brings consistency inside the building. As we've seen him in his brief spurts on the field, doesn't always carry that over to the field. I would assume that Sean Mannion holds on to that job. I've never really been a Kellen Mond guy going back to Texas A&M. I'm not sure if he's going to be even an NFL QB2. I'm just not. I don't love Sean Mannion as an NFL QB2 either. But
I was gonna say, like, you're kind of picking the best of the meh, right?
Exactly. But yeah, I think the thought there would be if Cousins goes down, who knows the playbook better, who isn't going to make the debilitating mistake. And I think right now they would say that would be Mannion. But, that is not solidified, in some of these preseason games, those two guys are going to get heavy action there. Because, again, I would guess that Kirk Cousins does not take one snap in any of the three preseason games. So we're going to see a lot of those two guys. And this is Kellen Mond's shot, to make a move in that competition. He's being given the opportunity.
Thor, do you kind of even feel like also like this start for Kellen Mond, or maybe should I say appearance and against the Raiders on Sunday, like this is probably going to tell them an awful lot. Like even if it's against 2s and 3s, it kind of feels like, for the lack of a better word, it's like a do or die situation for Kellen Mond if he wants to be the quarterback to Kirk Cousins in 2022.
It for sure is. Yeah, as far as the backup thing, and then the season long, that's where you're going to get the referendum on, is he even worth the roster spot going forward? So you have like these two different things going on. But I think the preseason is super important for him. The schemes are obviously different. between this season and last season. And I think the new offensive scheme is a better fit for Kellen Mond's skill set. It'll get him out on the edge a little bit more, bootlegs, play action, stuff like that. And I think it's going to benefit his game. He has that mobility aspect that Sean Mannion does not. And at this point, he might have a stronger arm than Sean Mannion as well. But yeah, you have to cut down the mistakes. So we'll see if he can cut down on those mistakes in the preseason.
I know all eyes are going to be on the offensive side of the ball for the Minnesota Vikings come this preseason game on Sunday against Vegas. But I want to talk about the defense too. It looks like they've now shifted to a 3-4 base defense, which is a little bit different than your traditional, right? And Armon Watts, who's in his final year of his contract, earning a spot. What are your thoughts there on the kind of slight adjustments and tweaks? Again, that's something that can always change. You can go 5-3, whatever. But right now, 3-4 base is a little bit different than we've seen from the Vikings.
Yeah, I mean it's way different. It's just a different philosophy of defending an NFL or defending any offense. But a couple manifestations of it is in the past. You'd have your two regular defensive tackles, and then you'd have your edge rushers playing the defensive end spots. In the 3-4, you have bigger defensive linemen because they're used more. You want to see some penetration for sure, but one of their huge jobs is occupying offensive linemen so that the four guys behind them can fly around and stuff like that. So, this year it's going to be, the three guys, they're going to be bigger, in comparison. Obviously Tomlinson, they signed Harrison Phillips for that. And then you mentioned, and both those initial two guys are more like, nose tackle, pure defensive tackles. And then Armon Watts, he's always been sort of, stuck between, is he a three technique? Is he a big edge? Whatever. This system is going to be way better for him than the last one, because the last one he's sort of stuck between a couple different things, whereas in this one he's a pretty prototypical 3-4 defensive end, and that's where he's getting the look. Right now on that depth chart, he is considered the starter. Be interesting to see if he can lock that down coming up. The other two spots are totally locked down. Harrison Phillips has been doing great in camp. I think he's been everything that they have hoped for so far. Dalvin Tomlinson playing really well as well.
Harrison Phillips great unless you're Garrett Bradbury at camp. That's always probably pretty fun. You mentioned Watts. I think this is, and again, entering that contract year, he knows he has to show up, and this is going to be an awesome opportunity. I'm excited to see what he can really bring under this new defensive scheme.
For sure. Yeah. And you get on the field more in a system that better suits your talents. This is going to be his shot to shine. And again, he's one of those guys over the next 3 weeks, 2-3 weeks, where he's going to get a shot to plant his flag and win that role for the season going forward. So we'll see how the rest of his camp goes.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, looking back at that depth chart that was released, as you'd mentioned, Thor, it's the first one, but no real surprises otherwise, really, for me. I mean, everything kind of seemed pretty prototypical of what we expected. I do want to call you out, Thor. A lot of people not happy with your KJ Osborn take from Monday. Would you like to defend yourself?
Why are they upset with my KJ Osborn take?
I don't know. I think they thought you were a little harsh on KJ.
Oh, well, I mean, I certainly didn't mean to be. I like KJ Osborn. Yeah. He's, you guys know that I do a lot of NFL draft stuff for work, and he's a guy that went under my radar. He's outplayed what my expectations were for him for sure. What you liked about him at Miami was, he had the speed and he was slippery, but I wondered if he had the ball skills for the NFL. I wondered if he had the play strength for the NFL, because you could see a tendency of him to get knocked off of his routes. Last year, he just sort of, at least for me, sort of removed the scales from my eyes, I guess, where he could be both, a legitimate slot guy. He could also function on the outside in the NFL. And what's interesting is, if you talk about last year's roster and who improved the most over the previous season, KJ Osborn would absolutely be on your short list, if not at the very top of it. And then in camp, Arif, our buddy Arif, said in his last thing that KJ Osborn has improved the most in this camp from last season. So you're talking about a guy who is now, significantly jumping forward. Seems like he is a legitimate NFL wide receiver 3 now. I didn't think I shot any strays his way last episode, but if I did, mea culpa to KJ Osborn.
Oh, there you go. See, we can all be friends, guys. Yes. Thank you for tuning in again. You're watching Before We Die on Purple Daily and Score North. I want to shift gears now a little. Well, actually, no. Before we shift gears, I want predictions. What are our predictions for Sunday in preseason game number 1 against Las Vegas at 3:25?
Oh man.
I want full scores too. I want the scores down to the button.
Well, one prediction is you're not going to see the starters very much, and I don't think fans shouldn't get their hopes up too much as far as the outcome of the game, because for O'Connell, I think this one is just sorting through your depth chart, and like I said, I think he's going to be pretty vanilla with it, as well. I did say the Vikings were going to win 12 games, but I'll give them. I'm going to give them a loss in this one to try to. I'm going to predict a loss in their first preseason game.
Wow, you have little faith. Declan, what do you think?
I would like to see either some rookie step up. I'd like to see an Andrew Booth step up. I don't know how much Lewis Ceen's going to play. If Lewis Ceen's indeed, second on this depth chart, does he get a little bit more of a longer leash in this preseason opener to play some snaps and to actually get in there and show that he's ready to play? This is a luxury, I think, for the Vikings to have that they have Harrison Smith and Cam Bynum at safety. And I feel like there might be some fear mongering that starts with Vikings fans of like, hey, that's our first round pick. He's not even going to be a starter. He's not even going to be an immediate impact player. But he was an awesome player at Georgia. I know Thor has a great scouting book on him too. But how big of an impact does he make immediately? What does Andrew Booth look like? And with Ed Ingram kind of sniffing around being the starting right guard in training camp practices,
right,
does he also get a lot of reps in this preseason opener? I'm excited to see which rookies make the biggest impact against the Raiders.
So, are they winning?
I think they win. You
got a score?
In terms of a score, I will say, let's see here. I will say 21-14. 21-14.
Ooh, we're looking low. All right.
Low.
All right. Yeah. I think the Vikings win as well, mostly because I don't have them winning 12 games throughout the regular season. So why not start off a win in the preseason? I will say the Vikings win 28-21. Sure, we'll go. They win by a touchdown. It's going to be a good game. Excited to watch them again. 3:25 on Sunday against the Las Vegas. Let's move on to Kevin O'Connell, who mentioned that he doesn't want to see any opposing fan jerseys at US Bank Stadium, which is awesome. You love that fandom, right? I know us Minnesotans are like, yeah, he's on our side. Realistically, probably not going to happen, right? But how important, obviously, is it going to be, especially game one against the Green Bay Packers, to really get that sucker filled with the purple and gold?
I mean, yeah, it's important for sure. The atmosphere of your stadium is for sure important. I do against the spread work predominantly with college football, but I have a different home field advantage number for all 131 teams because it's different, right? There's size of stadiums, there's capacity of stadiums, there's passion of the fan base. Some plays are just harder to play in than other ones, and it gives you. It ain't going to win the game for you. The 50,000 fans in the stadium ain't going to win the game for you, but it can improve it a little bit, with the home field advantage behind you. So yeah, that's super important.
Do you think US Bank is more daunting to play in than the Metrodome was? I mean, historically, they're very similar as far as winning percentage goes, but do you think there is a difference because US Bank's shiny and new and it just has a different vibe than obviously the classic Metrodome? But do you think there's a difference there in arenas?
I think, Lisa, I think it could eventually get there as far as that. The thing about the Metrodome was you had that rock hard playing surface that they played on, and they would pipe in all that noise. And so games where people were just going ballistic, you couldn't even hear yourself think. And I thought that was a competitive advantage in the same way that it was for the Twins. Remember back in the day, they'd have a guy, a speedster, would just knock the ball on the ground and be like a high bouncer. And every single time it would be a single or whatever. So, there's ways to, tilt your home field into, even more of an advantage for you. But, like you mentioned, the records are fairly similar at both places. But and I think that US Bank eventually could get that same kind of aura that the Dome used to have.
Right. Declan, I know you're kind of a baby, the Dome, right? The Metrodome.
Oh, yes, I know the Dome.
Okay.
Yes. I'm turning 30 this year, Jesse. I know that I don't look like it, but yes, no, I do know the Dome well.
I mean, favorite moments? Anybody have favorite moments from the Dome? Is it football related or is it Twins related?
I've only true story. I only saw one Vikings game at the Dome. It was 2007. It was actually Dante Culpepper's return to the Metrodome as a member of the Oakland Raiders. That was the only game I believe I saw at the Dome. So most of my games were Twins games, cheap seats, up in the nosebleeds. $7 got you into to a Major League Baseball game, which was awesome. Dollar Dome Dog Days.
Yes.
And there was something about, I don't know why, my friends and I still talk about it to this day, Fountain Cokes at Metrodomes hit different. I have no idea why. There was something in, they had like maybe the McDonald's straws or system, because those Fountain Coca-Colas, man, hit especially different in my teenage youth.
I like that. I would agree. I've never seen a Vikings game there either. I did see a Gopher football game at the Dome when they had to play over there once upon a time, and I saw a ton of Twins games. I also saw the Matamidi Zephyrs win state championships there in football. Go Zephs. In case you guys didn't know, big Zephyr fan. Thor, do you have any good Vikings football? Give us something. We got one of the three of us has to have a Vikings memory. I think.
I was hoping you weren't going to say good. I do have a couple of different memories though. The most distinct one, unfortunately, although it was cool to see in person, was it was that game when the Vikings and the Falcons went into overtime, and the Falcons had Michael Vick. My dad and I were sitting like 18 rows up behind the end zone that the Falcons were facing when they got the ball in overtime. And Vic goes, drops back, and then he started to run. And when he got into the open field, my dad tugs my shirt and he goes, "We're going," and like pulls me up. And Vic proceeds to just run through everyone. And then two of the Vikings, it was like Keystone Cops. They collided into each other in the air trying to tackle him. And my dad and I were at the top and beating the crowd out, as he crossed the goal line. That was a tough one. I have a different, a funnier Minnesota memory from the Metrodome, not associated with the Vikings though, but back when I covered the Twins for MLB.com. You guys remember the old baseball manager, Jim Leland?
Yep.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So Leland at the time, he was the manager of the Detroit Tigers. And I think people might know this, but like he hadn't been around for a little bit. So maybe it's forgotten, or maybe some people don't know, but Jim Leland was a chain smoker. Some like way back in the day, he would even do it like in the outfield if the stadium was open, stuff like that. But in the Metrodome, it was obviously closed. Well, we go in there on a Sunday before the game, where they sort of in this game. The reason I was covering the Tigers was because for MLB.com, I was an intern. If the opposing writer didn't come, then you became that team's beat writer for the week or the weekend or whatever. So I was like the Tigers MLB.com beat writer that weekend. So anyway, Leland calls us all into what was this little teeny tiny matchbox of an office in the Metrodome. I mean, not good. Like whoever's listening to this, your office at home or wherever you work was better than the opposing manager's offices at the Metrodome. Just this little teeny tiny thing. And so we all cram in there like sardines. And I was way up in front with Leland, but going back, as camera people and stuff like that, literally shoulder to shoulder. Leland's sitting down at the little desk on the far side of the room. There's no windows in this room. It's completely airtight. And he's like, all right, start with the questions. He lights his first cigarette. And he's just chain smoking it through. He gets done with that one, ashes it, lights up another one. He probably got through 5 different cigarettes during that media session. And again, we were in the tiniest room you could possibly imagine, shoulder to shoulder. Walking out of there, it was like a clown car coming out of Snoop Dogg's car, basically, with all the smoke that was coming out of that place.
Oh, I love it. I would love to hear your guys' Metrodome Vikings memories. That would be super fun. Drop them in the comments below or comment on our social media page. Going back to US Bank Stadium, though, and Kevin O'Connell's comment about loving the team, loving the fans, never seen opposing colors. I mean, do we care how much the fans do sell it out? Like for me, I think when fans get critical of a team or get critical of an empty arena, it's like, well, you're not buying the tickets. And Vikings tickets are a little bit pricey. Don't get me wrong, right? They're not the cheapest of the things. But how much stock do we need to put into, like, we need to support this team in order for them to be kind of that extra man out there on the field?
Well, you got to sell it in the NFL. I mean, it's a bad sign when you're not, for sure. And some of the passion comes from the success of the team. I think that started to become a problem with the last administration where, if you were in the building, I went to a couple games last year, that you'd start to hear the grumbling really early, or else like, if it was the second half and the Vikings were up by 10, and then it'd be a drive where it's like run on 1st and 10, run on 2nd and 9, run on 3rd and 7, punt. And then the natives were getting really, really restless. That the energy of that building was not to where it was at the beginning of the Zimmer era. And now it seems to be back with O'Connell. The most popular guy in town is always going to be the new coach that hasn't coached a game yet. Yeah. And if he wins, the excitement is going to build and build and build. if he doesn't, it's not. But yeah, I mean, the energy of the building for sure is something that helps the team.
Right. Dex, what do you think? I mean, do you think there's going to be a bigger fan presence because people are more excited about this new regime and what they could possibly do? I mean, they're going to win 12 games according to Thor. So
Yeah.
should be good.
I think it is. It's honestly a pretty awesome NFL experience. I'm a big believer in NFL as a couch sport. I love obviously waking up and rolling out of bed and watching football. And I was able to cover a lot of games at US Bank Stadium over the first 4 years it was open. And it's deafening in there. It's electrifying, and it definitely changes your perception of it being a traditional couch sport. In terms of the fans coming out a little bit more, I think it is going to be a good thing. If there was that shock and awe when they were interviewing Jim Harbaugh, right? When they potentially were maybe even going to hire him. And I do think in the short term, if it would have been Harbaugh, it would have probably even created a little bit more excitement. I think there would have been a big crash and burn if it was Harbaugh over O'Connell, but at least initial excitement, it probably would have favored more towards Harbaugh, and people would have been super excited to see him come out with like maybe purple khakis on, for God's sakes. Like I could totally see him doing that. But in general, I think people are excited for this. Yeah, it's most of the same team per se, but a different look and a different feel. And I think people are going to be packed inside of US Bank Stadium.
Well, and I feel like Justin Jefferson's going to really reach just another level. It's just this vibe I get from him, right? I mean, he's already phenomenal. You already know he's going to be everything and more that the Vikings want, but he's coming in with an extra swag confidence this year that I think is just going to be absolutely phenomenal.
1,000%. Yeah. I mean, he's getting better and better and better. And then he's another guy where the scheme and the philosophy and the offensive strategy is really going to help him. He's the bell cow of the offense for now, right? Like for Zimmer, it was Dalvin Cook or, the running game. O'Connell, McVay, those guys, Shanahan, they do it a little bit differently. And O'Connell wants to pass to set up the run. Jefferson, you're seeing him all over the formation. They've already seen this in practice, and then doing all sorts of fun stuff that you didn't see as much with the previous regime. Creative ways to get the ball into his hands, right? Like, Shanahan did this with Deebo Samuel. He was one of the first guys that was starting to give the wide receivers more touches out of the backfield. And now we've seen in practice, they're doing that with Jefferson. He's getting some of the jet sweeps, fly sweeps, getting handed off a little bit, moving around the backfield, the shifts, everything like that. They are going to find ways to get him touches. You don't have to manufacture touches for Justin Jefferson because he creates separation from a cornerback like the three of us breathe. It is he rolls out of bed creating separation. So you don't necessarily have to do it, but you also want the ball in that guy's hands as much as humanly possible. And I think that the difference between this staff and the last one is they're going to get him the ball, is they're going to feed him as much as he can eat, basically.
Right, exactly. I think he's the player that I'm most excited about. Again, going back to that depth chart that we talked about, Adam Thielen, obviously the other receiver, and KJ Osborn being number 3. But then it gets a little dicey after that as far as backups go. A surprise, Jalen Nailor. What is your take on him, Thor and Declan? And do we think that he'll see some significant time this year, potentially, especially if injuries mount?
Yeah, the fact that there's been really positive camp reports for him is a really good sign for Nailor, both in terms of making the initial roster, but also potentially having a role. And I think in year one, he can have a situational role, and it's as an outside pop the top boundary guy. He's not like, some slot guys are like, shifty kind of guys like that can get open in the short to intermediate sector. Like I guess maybe like a Kadarius Toney, you could think about it. Like Nailor tested fairly similarly to Toney, but his utility is on the outside, threatening the defense with his speed down the field. He can make plays down the field that a guy like Kadarius Toney would not be able to. It'll be interesting to see if the we've heard, I think it was a Reef, maybe it was Clausen, some of our past guests had mentioned that they're experimenting with Jefferson in the slot. Maybe Thielen's been in the slot a little bit, but if you do that, then there's got to be another guy on the outside. Osborn ostensibly could be that, but Nailor is more of that, the pure pop to top kind of a guy. Right. I don't know if he can get on the field initially, but that's super exciting. And then, as far as the rest of the receiver depth chart, it seems like everyone's having a good camp. It's at other positions where guys are struggling, but you're only hearing great things about Jefferson. You're only hearing good things about Thielen. You're hearing awesome things about KJ Osborn. He's one of the stars of camp so far. Feels like Amir Smith-Marset is having a really good camp as well. Nailor has been, the eye-opening rookie that was taken later among the UDFAs. And then even like, BC Johnson hasn't had any like of the high highs, but what he gives you, it's more of like cost certainty. You get a higher floor and you get consistency. Like he runs the correct routes. He's going to catch the ball if it hits him on the hands. Maybe not super creative after the catch or productive like that, but like he's going to bring those in. So you've seen, some of that stuff. I think the receiving depth, it's something that we haven't enjoyed as Vikings fans for a really long time. And I think they're about to have that again.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes I just watch Randy Moss highlights to remember what it was like. It's glorious, guys. But we're on the cusp of that, I think, right?
Think so.
Yeah. There we go.
Absolutely. I mean, the Vikings, in terms of their top two, it's right near the top of the league, if not the top of the league. And Osborn now feels like, again, he feels like a legitimate NFL wide receiver 3, maybe even becomes an above average one this coming season with O'Connell and the new scheme and everything. And then the 2 young guys that projected 4 and 5, they have shown a lot of promise this year. So I think it's great.
Again, we'll get to see them in action on Sunday, 3:25 against Las Vegas, first preseason game of the year. You're watching Before We Die on Purple Daily and Score North. I'm Jesse Pierce. He's Thor Nystrom. Dex is filling in for Ross, our normal producer. We appreciate you having on, Declan. Wasn't this fun? Is this like your new favorite Purple Daily show?
It is. It is. I was like what third? I was the QB3 basically coming into this, and now I really like my chance to be QB1 by the end.
Ross did make us promise to not have you overtake him, but maybe. Who knows? We'll see. We'll just have to see.
Ross.
You'll have to tune in Monday.
CFL. I'm sorry, Ross. I'm sorry I'm taking it.
You'll have to tune in Monday to see who our producer is that week. Maybe Judd hops on. Who knows? But again, thank you everybody for tuning in, checking us out. We're still in our infancy. We're growing, but we want to bring you some unique Vikings takes each and every week, Mondays and Thursdays. Don't forget to hit subscribe to all Purple Daily content. We're not the only new show, Randy's Rants, where I believe you can see Declan frequently on there as well. So be sure to subscribe to all of that. Thank you for checking us out, and Skol Vikes. Have a good one.